You probably don't know Harland David Sanders, but you must know Colonel Sanders, the smiling chef on every KFC bucket you see. This is how he single-handedly built KFC from scratch, later despising the same company and even sued it. Sanders was born on September 9, 1890. His father passed away when he was just 5 years old, and his mother had to take on odd jobs to support the family. At a young age, Sanders took on the responsibility of looking after his younger siblings and began practicing his cooking skills. He loved to cook and often stayed up late to develop his skills. By the time he was 10, he was already an excellent cook. Before he started KFC, Sanders tried many jobs in his early years. He worked as a streetcar conductor, an insurance salesman, a tire salesman, a steamboat operator, a midwife, a secretary, and a carriage painter. He even had a brief stint in the US Army, serving in Cuba when he was just 15 years old. When he turned 18, Sanders got married and had 3 children. He tried to get a more professional job by taking a law course through mail, but his law career ended when he got into a courtroom role with one of his clients, which destroyed his reputation. Sanders later got a job working at a railroad, but when he got fired from that as well, his wife Josephine decided to leave him. He was devastated and hid in the woods near her parents' house. He was thinking of kidnapping his kids, but at the last moment he changed his mind and decided instead to speak to his father-in-law, who gave him a job selling life insurance and convinced his wife to take him back. He later divorced his wife, and after his son died, the grief was too hard to bear, tearing their relationship apart. The first half of Harland Sanders' life was filled with failures and sadness, but he found success and happiness again by doing what he loved to do the most: cooking. Sanders started cooking meals for customers at the gas station where he worked. And though the fried chicken wasn't on the menu initially, Sanders found a way to cook it quickly and still retain its flavor using a pressure cooker. He also created his secret blend of 11 herbs and spices, which made the chicken a bestseller. Sanders painted ads on barn doors to market his gas station food. Still, his aggressive promotion annoyed a competitor named Matt Stewart, who kept painting over his signs despite warnings from Sanders. When Sanders and 2 managers went to confront Stewart, he fired a shot that killed one of the managers. Sanders fired back in self-defense, hitting Stewart in the shoulder. Stewart was then sentenced to 18 years in prison, and Sanders was free on a plea of self-defense. It was a breakthrough for him because he was left to dominate the local area with his biggest competitor gone. His successful streak went on for a long time until a new interstate highway was constructed right next to his restaurant. This directed traffic away from his restaurant, and eventually it was closed down. And just like that, Colonel Sanders was at retirement age with no income except for a meager social security check for $105 monthly. But he did not give up. Sanders believed that the problem was not a matter of giving up, but rather a problem of what to do next. So he remained determined to find his next opportunity. By this time, he was already an old man, but Colonel Sanders was not done yet. He was just on the verge of his most significant breakthrough. After his last failed restaurant, Sanders thought instead of running restaurants himself, he could just franchise his restaurants. Hence, Colonel Sanders had to travel across the United States to find potential franchisees. He put pressure cookers and a bag of his famous seasoning in the car and hit the road. Living out of his car, he convinced restaurant owners to let him cook his chicken for their employees. If they liked it, he stayed for a few days to cook for their customers, hoping the restaurant would want to become a franchisee. Sanders was rejected 1,009 times before finally getting someone to agree. Even pro-sorry athletes only have a little perseverance. His first successful franchise came in 1952, when Pete Harmon of South Salt Lake decided to sell Sanders chicken. When the deal was done, Harmon's sales tripled in the first year, and he coined the phrase, "finger-licking good," which later became the slogan across the whole KFC chain. Within a couple of years, Sanders no longer needed long road trips to find new partners. People started coming to him instead. Word about his chicken spread rapidly across the country, and by the end of 1963, he had franchised over 600 outlets across the US and Canada, building a company worth millions. Sanders was careful not to keep the exact recipe private from franchisees, so he sent the pre-made spice blend. Sanders recognized the idea of a secret recipe generated a lot more intrigue, and he had a marketing talent. By the early 1960s, KFC had over 900 outlets, including some in the UK and Japan. The franchise model was a massive success, and everyone wanted a piece of it. One fine day, sometime in 1964, a group of entrepreneurs led by a 29-year-old named John Brown came to Sanders with an offer to buy his business. Initially, Sanders turned them down, but after they pressured him and agreed not to tamper with his recipe, Sanders eventually decided to sell his company for $2 million. He was already getting old, so he thought selling would allow him a little more time to enjoy the final stages of his life. Once the deal went through and Sanders became a millionaire, he continued to be involved in KFC's publicity campaigns, traveling worldwide for various promotions and appearing on TV while wearing his iconic white suit. Meanwhile, John and the other entrepreneurs who took over KFC's management made significant changes that helped the business grow and opened many new locations. However, in 1971, John Brown sold the company to a giant food conglomerate, and the new owners of KFC began to change things. Unlike John, who agreed not to tamper with the Colonel's recipes, the new owners of KFC made many changes, including changing the gravy to a cheaper, easier-to-make version. Even after he sold his business, Sanders still visited lots of KFC stores himself, and when he tried the new recipe, he said it was horrible and not fit for sale. The new company prioritized expansion over food quality and Sanders' legacy, and this started the many lawsuits from Sanders against the company, and vice versa. In 1973, he sued KFC's parent company for $122 million, claiming that they had stolen his image and recipes and had diluted the quality of the food. The case was eventually settled out of court, and Sanders received $1 million and was allowed to continue using his image and name for promotional purposes. Despite the bitter legal battles with KFC's new owners, he continued wearing his iconic white suit and visiting KFC stores, expressing his disappointment with the changes made to the recipes. His criticisms of the new gravy recipe and the quality of the chicken was so public that it led to a franchisee suing him for libel in 1978. Sanders remained unhappy with KFC's direction and decided to open his own competing restaurant, Claudia Sanders, the Colonel's Lady Dinner House. This move led to KFC suing Sanders over the copyright of his name and the use of his image in promoting products he hadn't developed. The legal battle eventually settled, and Sanders was paid $1 million, but had to rename his competing restaurant to simply Claudia Sanders Dinner House. Despite his challenges, Sanders remained a fighter and a trailblazer in the fast food industry. Today, Claudia Sanders Dinner House is the only place customers can taste the original Colonel Sanders fried chicken. Sanders remained dedicated to his work until the end. He died in 1980 at 90 due to acute leukemia. Being a hard worker, he continued to work until a month before his death, as he had no interest in retiring. Today, there are over 25,000 KFC outlets worldwide, all started by a man who began cooking chicken in a gas station. Despite failures, rejections, and tragedy, Sanders persevered, starting his new business model at 65 and becoming a millionaire by 74. The lasting impact of Sanders' legacy reminds us that every failure can be a stepping stone to something better. He remained an inspirational figure who demonstrated that hard work and perseverance could make anything possible. And that's it. Be sure to catch our next video, featuring more authentic stories from top brands. Joe Law and $4.5 billion scandal. The man who robbed Malaysia.